We are going to have a lesson all about the language of fractions. Considering the fact that you learned a bit about fractions last year, this really should be a review. Some of these pictures may be somewhat familiar, while others may be new. For this lesson, we're really going to focus on the words we use to talk about fractions. First, let's discuss what is a fraction. You've used them, you've talked about them, but how would we actually define it? A fraction is a number that represents a part of a whole. We have talked about parts of wholes before. We just finished our lesson all about decimals. Decimals are another way of representing a fraction. While we haven't yet visited percents, they too are a way to show a part of a whole. What do we call the two parts of a fraction? The top part of a fraction is called the numerator. Besides for being called the top number, it also tells us how many pieces are shaded or taken away, or that we have in our example. The actual use of the numerator will depend on the example that you are presented with. The bottom number is called the denominator, and while it is the bottom number of a fraction, we must remember that it shows how many equal-sized pieces make the whole, and we must include the equal-sized pieces as part of our definition. For if the pieces are not of equal size, then we cannot say it is actually a complete fraction. What are equivalent fractions? Well, looking at the word equivalent, hopefully you've noticed the root of the word equal. And this part sounds very much like value. In fact, equivalent fractions are fractions that have the same value but look different with different numbers. Looking at our pie charts right here, we see that 1/2, 2/4, and 4/8 each represent the same amount. They're each showing half of the circle. Looking at it numerically, we can discover something else. 1/2 times 2/2 is equal to 2/4, and 2/4 times 2/2 is equal to 4/8. So we have multiplied the numerator and the denominator by the same digit. This special fraction of having the same numerator and denominator is extremely special. In fact, it has a special name. This fraction is called a unity fraction. Unity fraction from the word unit. Unit meaning one. A unity fraction is a fraction whose numerator and denominator are the same number, and it always has a value of 1 whole. 2/2 is equal to 1 whole, 2 parts out of the 2 parts that make the whole, so it is equal to 1. And we know multiplying any number by 1 doesn't change its value. So 2/4 times 1 equals 4/8. While the digits have changed, the value has not, because we've really multiplied it by 1. Is the numerator always going to be less than the denominator? If you haven't worked with adding fractions, you might say yes. But let's take a look at this situation. 3/6 plus 5/6 would give us 8/6. Here, our numerator is actually greater than the denominator, and there's a special word for when that happens. They're called improper fractions. Improper fraction is when a fraction has a numerator which is greater than the denominator, and that gives it a value greater than a whole. 8/6 is more than 1 whole. How much more than a whole? Well, let's look at that. 8/6 has 6/6 plus 2/6, and this should look very much familiar to everybody from the last page we just looked at. 6/6 is a unity fraction. It is equal to 1, and 2/6 are left behind. So 8/6 is equal to 1 2/6. This is called a mixed number. It is a fraction with a whole number. Our next lesson will discuss if leaving an answer as 2/6 is okay or if we have to change that further.